Hi there, and welcome to the MS102 OPORD Review and LRM Refresher course. This is a supplemental lesson. So this is not necessarily within the ROTC Blackboard curriculum. However, the MS101 curriculum in the fall does cover the Army Leadership Requirements Model. And in our particular university, we actually introduced the OPORD in a very basic format and at a basic level for our ones earlier in their career. It doesn't entail everything that the 2s and 3s classes do when it comes to the OPORD, but in case you have seen it or haven't, this will be a good review on what to expect and what to know about the OPORD itself. Of course, like I said, this should be a refresher on the LRM or the Leadership Requirements Model from your fall courses. My name is Captain Silver Beatty. I'm an APMS at the University of Montana, and I will be leading you through this lesson. So to start off with, we just have one learning objective on here. Again, like I said, we're going to review the operations order and then refresh ourselves a little bit on the Army Leadership Requirements Model lessons. Again, that's the Army LRM is what you'll probably hear me refer to it as well as operations order being referred to as the OPORD going forward. So first, when it comes to orders, whether you've gotten this course or not, you need to know that they are a communication. They can be done verbally, written, or even signaled. Typically in ROTC, you're going to either hear a verbal order or you're going to receive it written, text, emailed, in some way, shape, or form in a text form, right? But we also kind of forget that even a signal can be an order. So if you're walking along during your leadership lab, somebody puts up the halt sign, that's an order, right? So that's a hand and arm signal. For the sake of this course, we're really just going to talk about the verbal and written at a very basic level. You're going to understand a few things about it, enough to be able to understand kind of what's going on as an MS1. Of course, as an MS1, you're just supposed to be a sponge, learn as much as you can, not necessarily know or be a subject matter expert in any of this. So this is more just for exposure to you. Now, orders themselves, they convey instructions from a superior to a subordinate. So that means a company commander gives orders to a platoon leader. Platoon leader gives orders to their squad leaders. Squad leaders give orders to their team leaders and so forth. So orders do come from typically one echelon, as we call it, above you, from somebody that you directly report to is an easier way to think about it. So if you're an MS1, you're likely in a team right now being directed by a team leader. Or maybe you're sitting in a team leader position being directed by a squad leader. They would be giving you orders. Now, orders don't always come like this, but the standard for issuing these it's called our 5-paragraph format. That means any type of an order, especially verbally or written, should come with those 5 paragraphs there in bold. Your situation, your mission, execution, sustainment, and command and signal. That's also the order that most orders go in. So the way that I remember this and have since I was a baby cadet back in the mid-2000s is sergeants major eat sugar cookies, or the sergeant major eats sugar cookies. Regardless, that's what's really worked for me. That's actually what I teach all of our cadets today. I think Army-wide, that's how most people remember this. But if you have some other mnemonic that works for you, whatever it takes for you to remember SMESC. Situation, mission, execution, sustainment, command and signal. Now, as we talked about, you're going to likely get verbal or written while you're here in ROTC. The technique that's chosen for how to distribute that order is going to be the discretion of the person giving it, right? So that's going to depend on your time and your situation, how much time is available, what's going on around us. You know, if you're receiving an order that includes everything that you're going to do that week, like our university does, that's going to come out on Monday mornings. So Monday mornings, people get what to expect for the rest of the week, in addition to what they received Friday at noon with the company-wide and battalion-wide emails. Now, that's allowing for a lot of time. If you don't have much time, you're likely going to go verbal and just give that quick command so things can happen faster. All you need to know here are the 5 paragraphs of what we call the OPORD or operations order. And then knowing whether or not to make it verbal or written is going to depend on your time and situation. Now, you've heard me say OPORD. You also may have heard me say WARNORD or WARNO in other classes. There are 3 types of orders. We have the warning order or WARNORD. You might also hear it called the WARNO. We have the operation order or the OPORD. And then we have the fragmentary order, also known as the FRAGORD or FRAGO. Now I have these in order this way because this is typically the order that you would actually get these. You would first get a warning order, then an operation order, and then a FRAGORD. And that's because your WARNO, WARNORD, is a preliminary notice of an order or action to follow. Think of it as basically a heads up. Hey, this is coming. These are the few things you need to know about this. Your operation order is the meat and potatoes. This is all of the information that they're going to give you. So it's technically, by the book, a directive issued by a commander to their subordinate commanders for the purpose of effecting the coordinated execution of an operation. So again, that's basically just, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. This is who's in charge, what stuff we need, and this is what's going on in the area. Your operation order is pretty darn thick. It's going to be the biggest of these 3 orders. And then I have fragmentary order, or FRAGO, FRAGORD, down there on the bottom, because this is a change. This is just, oh, there's been a change to the plan, change to our order, here's the change. So it is called a FRAGO, FRAGORD. Just think of it as a change or modification. That's all. So a WARNO, hey, this is a heads up of what's to come. Operations order, okay, now that time has come and here's what we're gonna do. FRAGO, fragmentary order, oh, there's a change in the plan and this is the change. That's simple. Now, obviously this is supposed to be a review on the OPORD itself, so we won't talk much more about WARNO or FRAGOs. I want you to know that an operation order per JP 5-0 is a directive issued by a commander to a subordinate commander for the purpose of effecting the coordinated execution of an operation. You just saw that on the last slide. That's a lot of big words that basically just says it's, hey, I'm your boss, I'm telling you what to do. This is how to do it. This is the order that I'm giving you to accomplish, or the mission that I'm giving you to accomplish. That next bullet there, commanders issue OPORDs to direct the execution of long-term operations as well as the execution of discrete short-term operations within the framework of a long-range op order. This can be a little bit confusing. What this just means is that there's really no maximum size or timeline that an op order might cover. So for instance, at our university, the cadets are issued a semester tactical and administrative op order at the very beginning of the semester. That will cover all of the leadership labs. Then they receive mini OPORDs, or even sometimes we call them FRAGOs, where they are lane by lane or lab by lab. So the OPORD itself covers everything that you need to know about the semester, and then there's additional op orders in there for the tactical lanes and or administrative labs that we're doing. Another way to think about this might be, as a college student, you receive a syllabus at the beginning of your semester that outlines everything that you're going to have. It might have something small, or not small necessarily, but an abbreviated comment about an essay that you're going to have to write, or a lab report that's going to be due at this time. And as you get closer to that, you'll get the parameters for that essay. So in a thicker, you can consider that a second op order that you receive that's part of a long-range op order. It's a short-term operation within the framework of a long-range op order. If that's confusing, that's okay. We do not expect you to understand all of this. Again, do not expect you to be subject matter experts. We just don't want you lost in the sauce when you're out there hearing the terms OPORDs, FRAGO, WARNO, and having no idea what's going on. Now, there is a purpose to this, right? So first, they convey instructions, and I have this in bold of what I want you to pay attention to. OPORDs should be, they're in a standard format that's very clear and simple. Now, those of us that have been in the Army for more than a day understand that OPORDs are not always simple, not even necessarily always clear, but the point of them is to have a simple 5-paragraph format so that if you're looking for information in any kind of an op order, you know where to go to find that specific information. Now the next purpose for this is that it focuses the subordinates' activities. So it really does come down and really give you some clarifying guidance on what your subordinates should be doing during this mission or operation. It also permits those same subordinates to start preparing their supporting orders. So you, at the company level, might give out an op order to your platoon leaders. This gives them guidance, left-right limits, a lot of information and coordinating instructions to start writing their own op orders to give out to their squad leaders and vice versa. It also is really important that you understand it implements instructions from your higher commander's order. So if you're receiving an op order from, say, your platoon leader, it's implementing instructions that came from their boss. And then all of that in bold there, an op order should provide the tasks and activities, the constraints, so your left and right limits, and any coordinating instructions that are necessary to accomplish whatever mission is stated within that op order. And don't forget, your mission is the second paragraph. So the entire op order is based on that second paragraph and how we're going to accomplish that. Now the op order does have its general characteristics. It is a full inclusion of critical facts. It shouldn't have a lot of fluff. We need to just stick with the facts that matter for this mission. They are typically, the way that they're verbally given and or written is in an authoritative way with positive expression. We want them to be clear and concise. Sometimes it's hard to keep these concise. It's really important to look those over and again, just stick to the stuff that needs to be in there for your subordinates to understand. You don't want to overload them with too much information. And as you progress further into your ROTC and even officer career, you'll start understanding how to pull the information that only you and your subordinates need to keep your op order concise. As common sense would say, we need it to be complete. It's really hard to give orders for something when you haven't given all of the order, right? We don't want to be giving partial orders. If we are, that's usually like a warno, right? Here is the 5 W's that I need you to know, and then an op order itself should be complete. It needs to be flexible. So flexibility just means that there needs to be some stuff like portions built in there that allows for changes to your environment. So a change in the plan or something that you didn't expect to happen during your mission, it makes you kind of critically think ahead of time about how you would handle those situations. You don't want to get too deep in the weeds in this. You want to keep it pretty broad, but the flexibility of it just allows for those fragos to be possible. And then timeliness. Now this is something I want you to keep in mind as you progress through your career, that op words should not just be sat on. In other classes and as an MS2, you'll learn about the 1/3, 2/3 rule that we talk about, which is essentially if you're given 3 hours to complete a mission, at the 1 hour mark, you should be giving that op order out. So they need to be timely to allow that other 2 hours to rehearse and execute your mission. So timeliness is key. You don't want to spend too much time on an op order or even giving an op order. It should be pretty quick. All right, and here are your 5 paragraphs. I'm not going to talk too much about what's within each section there. Again, situation, mission, execution, sustainment, and command and signal. Those are your 5 paragraphs. The situation is focusing on what's going on around us to include your enemy forces, friendly forces. That's really all you need to know about this. What's going on? What's the weather doing? What's our terrain look like? What is our situation that we're sitting in right now? Your mission is the shortest paragraph. It is 1 sentence, typically, that covers the 5 W's. Who is responsible for this mission? What are we doing? What type of operation are we on? When do we need to execute this? Where are we and where are we executing this? And why? What's the purpose for doing this mission? If you can remember that your mission needs to simply have the 5 W's of an operation, you're golden. That is the one thing that as an MS1, you should really be listening in on the mission. See if you can catch all 5 of those the next time you receive one. Now the execution paragraph, this is the how. This is the meat and potatoes of your op order. So this is where you're gonna have your commander's intent, which the ultimate conditions that must be met for success just means What needs to happen for us to say, thumbs up, this went well, we accomplished what we set out to accomplish? Then the concept of the operation, that's the how. This should be your longest section. This is the one that you spend the most time on, both writing and explaining. If you've been to a lab, you've probably seen a terrain model come out, or a sand table, or even a map be used with somebody pointing to different things and explaining where the movements will be. That's where this section falls in, is underneath the execution paragraph. How are we going to execute this mission? Your sustainment paragraph, that's talking about all the supplies and other logistical things that you need and your soldiers need in order to successfully complete this. And then your command and signal. What's important about this one at the MS1 level is just understanding the succession of command. And that simply means who's in charge, and if that person goes down, who's next up, and who's next up after that. So if you think about like the American government, we've got the president, we've got the vice president, we've got the Speaker of the House, we've got all of these different parts and pieces that have a specific succession of command in case whoever's in command is no longer able to do that position. And then you also incorporate your communication procedures in this paragraph, which is how you're going to communicate. You might hear the term PACE plan, which is your primary, alternate, contingency, and an emergency forms of communication. You'll hear things like radios, cell phones, hand and arm signals, etc. Those are all different ways to communicate. You need to listen in this how your unit or element is planning on communicating during this operation. And that portion will also talk about what each person is called. Because on any type of communication, electronic communication, we don't use names, we use call signs is what they're called. And there's specific call signs for each position. You don't need to know those things right now. Just understand basically what your team leader's call sign is, and maybe that next step up, so that squad leader's call sign. Now, they're in red for a reason, right? Foot stomp, foot stomp. Our mission and execution are considered the two most important sections. Why? Because they tell us what we're doing and how we're gonna do it. So it's important to still know what we need supply-wise, or how we're gonna communicate with each other and who's in charge. And it's important to know what's going on in our area of operation. But without a mission and execution, you can't complete a mission because you don't know how. So if you're still learning how to listen into OPORDs, or maybe you haven't even gotten a chance to listen, don't let yourself get overwhelmed with the other three paragraphs. Really listen in for that mission with the 5 W's and the execution that explains the how this is going to happen. That's the two most important sections of any op order. Now, I like to break this down by sections and the question that it's going to answer. So at the MS1 level, what I want you to be able to do when you're listening to an OPORD is when they say situation, ... You should be able to answer the question, what's going on? Not what are we about to do, but what's going on in the area around us? What is the situation that we're working with right now? Moving into the mission, you should be able to answer those 5 W's. What are we doing? First Grizzly Company, 1st Platoon is going to conduct a road march in vicinity of this area at this time and date in order to do this. That's your who, your what, your when, your where, and your why. Those are your 5 W's that you should be able to hear in the mission. If you don't understand that, make sure you talk to your team leader or squad leader and understand what your mission is. Execution, how are we going to do it? That entire paragraph should just answer, how are we going to do this? At your level, I also want you to understand that in the execution, you should be listening specifically just for your team's role in this operation and your specific role if you've been named to maybe a special team or something. That'll be briefed during that execution paragraph. You should really be listening for your specific job and your team's job during that mission. For sustainment, how will we get supply? What supplies do we need? There's a lot of information in that one. In most programs, it is taught the platoon sergeant briefs this paragraph, so that'll be your cue that the execution paragraph is over and we've moved into sustainment if your platoon sergeant has moved in and started briefing that part. And then command and signal, who's in charge? And I would even add in there, and how do I get a hold of them? That's the question that should be answered by the command and signal paragraph. All right, so that is all for the OPORD. Let's move into our Army leadership stuff. So leadership itself, I want to really focus on a few words here. It's the activity of influencing people by providing them purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish a mission or goal in some way to improve the organization. So we usually think of good leaders as being influential, they are motivating, they're inspiring. Those are the kind of terms that we want to use and you probably want to be described as a leader. An Army leader, by definition, is anyone who, by virtue of assumed role or assigned responsibility, again, look at that word, inspires and influences people by providing them purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission and improve the organization. If you're watching this as an MS1, when it says right there, assigned responsibility or assumed role, you can be a leader. You are a leader already. While you are in a program that's teaching you more leadership skills, I'm sure at some point in your life, whether it was in high school, middle school, maybe you played sports and you were some sort of a leader on that sports team. Maybe you've tutored and you've been a leader to some people who needed that extra tutoring. Maybe you're an oldest child, and so you've been a leader of your siblings in some way, shape, or form. You've had leadership roles before, and now you're working on honing in those skills. We're not teaching you how to be leaders, but we're giving you the skills that you likely already have and teaching you how to pull those out. So I want you to remember that an Army leader is seen as somebody who is inspirational and influential. A good Army leader can get buy-in from their subordinates. A good platoon leader can gain buy-in from their platoon sergeants, squad leaders, even their most junior enlisted, because that helps them to accomplish their mission. And to gain that buy-in, you have to provide purpose, direction, and motivation. You cannot just be the kind of leader that says, do this because I said so. Now, as a mom of 3, I've learned that do this because I said so, it doesn't do much. Giving my children some sort of purpose, direction, motivating them through things helps get their room clean or their laundry done or the dogs fed, right? I have to provide that. I have to be influential. I have to inspire them. You can only get so far by being the kind of leader that says, do this because I'm in charge and I said so. So I really encourage you to look into different types of leaders, not even necessarily military leaders. In fact, in my classes, we really talk about outside of the military leaders because you're going to get lots of book lists as you grow through your career. You're going to be forced to read about all the big time Army leadership, but you can learn a lot about leadership itself from sports, coaches in different sports, scientific, people that have really made some change and made some pushes in the scientific community, in the education community, in the political community. There are tons of great leaders out there. I encourage you to look into a lot of them and start pulling the different traits that you see from them that you would like to see in yourself. As you can tell, I'm pretty darn passionate about this topic. I love anything leadership related. And the Army has brought together something called the Army Leadership Requirements Model. This is the first time you're seeing this pizza pie. That's okay. If it's a refresh, you're probably going to see me break it down a little differently than you've seen before. And that's okay. So if we look at this pie, it's a big circle, right? It has 6 different big categories. And then each of those categories have several subcategories or sub-traits that we look for in good leaders. So this right here, the Army has decided that this photo, this diagram, encompasses everything that we want to see in the ideal leader. Now, if you look there in the middle, it's broken in half. We've got that top right there is attributes, and the bottom left there is called competencies. That's just, we consider character, presence, and intellect to be attributes, leads, develops, and achieves are all competencies. Now to complicate this one more time, it's also split into uneven thirds, where 2 of those categories, character and presence, are considered part of the B of the be-no-do model. Then we have intellect, which, common sense, is part of the no model. And then we've got do there on the bottom, where all the competencies are pulled under the do. So some people call this the Army LRM. Some people call it the attributes and competencies diagram. I call it the be-no-do model. There are lots of ways to describe this, but it all says the same thing. If you can meet quite a few of these things, you're on track to be a good leader, especially in the Army's eyes. Now what I want you to do for a few seconds, go ahead and pause the video. I want you to look at all these, and I want you to find 2 subcategories. So when we're saying sub, I'm saying if you look at character, a subcategory or sub-attribute might be discipline. Or if you're looking at achieves, might be gives feedback. So when you pause this, I want you to take a moment, write it down, be honest with yourself. I want you to find 2 attributes and 2 competencies that you truly feel you are strong at or that you do a good job in. And then I want you to take a step further in your self-awareness and find 2 attributes and 2 competencies that you either struggle with or you would like to make better for yourself. So pause this here, think about those, write them down, and then I'm gonna break this down a little differently for you as well. Okay, now that you've thought about those a little bit, take those forward after this lesson. Maybe talk to somebody if you have a mentor in your ROTC program or your ROTC instructor themselves. Take those and start asking the questions of how do I make this better? How, for the things that you struggle in or want to get better in. And then take those same things that you know you're strong in and start thinking about how you can teach or coach others to also be strong in those things. How can you impart your wisdom in those categories, in those areas, onto your classmates? Because when we're all working together to build each other up, we're just going to be better in the end, right? Absolutely. I know you're nodding your head. And if you're not inspired by this, that's okay too. Hey, something to know ahead of time. Yes, you're an MS1. You are not getting evaluated on things, but your MS3s, and if you're watching this in 2024, it's currently called what we call a SOAR card. You may have heard it called a blue card. Maybe your program still calls it that. It's essentially an evaluation form that your MS3s receive throughout their year. And then they go to advanced camp or cadet summer training, their summer, and they're evaluated on all of these things. They're specifically evaluated on those subcategories. And so we want to build these in you. And that's why it's important for you to start talking to people now about how to build these things up so that you are as prepared as possible to be evaluated on any given category at any given time. When you're in a leadership position, we want to see you showcasing your strengths in all of these, but we also want you to exercise that subcategory of character, of humility, and understand where you're not strong and push yourself to get better in those sections. All right. So now breaking this down, what I tell my cadets when we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the difference between an attribute and a competency? Why are they broken differently like that? Take a look to the left there. The way that I remember it is your attributes are who we are. Who are you? You are a person of good character. You have presence, and you are a smart intellectual person. So you are all of those things. You are disciplined, you are confident, you are innovative. Now the competencies, I think of these more as verbs, right? It's what you do. You lead others, you prepare yourself, you give feedback, you adapt, you get results, you build trust. You do those things, which is also probably why that whole section is the do part of the be no do model. Now, if you want to look at this in the uneven thirds, the B part of the model is just be a good human. That's what I tell people. I just want to see that you are being a good human. Know is pretty common sense, like we said. Know your stuff. And then the do, just do the right thing. extend influence, lead by example, develop others, steward the profession, give feedback, get results. That's all doing the right thing. So if you are a good human and you continue working to know your stuff and you're always doing the right thing, even when no one's watching, just like your parents or other key adult figures in your life have probably told you more than once, if you are exercising those things, you are hitting all of the parts of the be, know, do model. Now, this is just another way to look at it. It's another breakdown. You've got your attributes on top, competencies below. If you don't like circles and pie shapes, maybe this diagram breaks it down a little different, but it does include all the same things, right? We've got our attributes, who we are and what we do. And then we've got it broken into the 3 uneven thirds of our be, know, do model. Character and presence, be. Intellect, know. And leads, develops, achieves, do the right thing. Now, I did talk on that last slide that your MS3s are being evaluated on this, but throughout your entire officer career, or if you choose to not follow through with ROTC, you absolutely should, as I'm sure everybody has told you. But if you choose not to, even in the real world, you are constantly being judged and evaluated on things like character, your intellect, your ability to get results, etc. So it is important to be self-aware and do some self-assessment on where you're strong and where you need to work a little bit harder. Not a single military officer is perfect in any of these categories. And I'll tell you now that who I am as an officer today looks completely different than who I was when I first commissioned. I was super physically fit back then, but I had almost zero interpersonal tact. Now, 3 kids later, I'm not quite as super physically fit, but I've worked really hard on my interpersonal tact. What's important is not that you're perfect in all of these, but that you're consistently trying to get better, and that you're trying to motivate your classmates, your peers, even your superiors, but then your subordinates as well, to be working their hardest to hit all of these different categories also. So I know it feels like a lot. Think about a leader that you've had in your life that has just really spoken to you and really influenced and motivated you, that you look up to this day. And take a look at this chart and see what of these do they fit under. What do they check the block in? All right, so that was a pretty long course there. Hopefully it gave you a pretty good semi-in-depth basic review of the OPORD, and then a good refresh on what you should have already learned about the Army Leadership Requirements Model. If you hadn't covered that last semester, that's okay. All universities have different curriculum crosswalks, different ways that they teach their classes. But this is a pretty important lesson that you'll take through with you for the rest of your ROTC and military career. So keep those in mind. And as always, if you have any questions about any of this, reach out to your ROTC instructor. If you're just watching this for fun or that person is not available, reach out to an MS4, maybe even a high-speed MS3. And if you still can't get your questions answered, feel free to message me anytime at silver.beatty@mso.umt.edu. Thank you.